Surf's up. It's Mauisnake for SkinClub, and I'm going to be ranking the teams that went through the Americas RMR. I just covered this for PGL on the official broadcast, and some of the teams obviously qualified, 7 of them did, and the other 9 teams obviously fell. And I've created a handful of tiers to rank them in. So I'll be going through all of the teams. I've seen a little bit of all of them at this point, or quite a bit of some of them actually, and I'm gonna tier them based off of kind of like what to think about now of them, given what transpired at the Americas RMR, where all of these teams had enough chances to really prove themselves. So first things first, because it's a black background right here, Bestia is kind of hard to see, and so I really want to rank them first, just so that it's kind of more obvious that they've been ranked, because when they're down here, it's black on black, and then you can't see anything. I'm going to start Bestia off in the much to think about tier list, or the tier, because they obviously didn't qualify, but they are, to me, a decent team in a couple ways. Zoc and Naz are the supportive elements for them. They probably left a little bit to be desired in terms of individual ability. None of their players have, by the way, been to a major, so to expect them to do well was probably a bit far-fetched. However, they did go 2 and 3, and I will say that Thomason was one of probably the best 7 players at this entire RMR, and so much to think about, because there's a lot to... he's very good, and I don't really expect that he's going to be on the roster moving forward, because I would imagine that people would probably pick him up. Okay, next up, Luchov was also good, by the way, for Bestia. Next up is Crew. This was probably one of the worst teams I saw so far. They're definitely in the bottom 3 of teams that are here, and I just felt like they weren't really cohesive necessarily. They technically found a victory against Nouns, who also got to be in the gotta change it up category here, because both of these teams were pretty much a clear cut beneath everybody else. Nouns is so curious because obviously they have a lot of resources dedicated towards their team. They actually have some pretty solid individual pieces, but clearly something's not working in these kinds of environments, despite the fact that at ESL Challenger League they did pretty decently. They were a top 4 or top 6 team there, and so you would have imagined that they would have done better than teams like, say, Boss, who actually did pretty well for themselves, but are now sort of in the much to think about tier list. I think what you really have to think about is how do you elevate your game if you're Boss, because you're definitely, like, some of your pieces seem okay. I'd say Freshie was probably the player that inspired me the most. By the way, shouts out Freshie. He used to watch my streams. Used to talk to me regularly, but now he's moved on to greener pastures, aka getting a victory against M80 at the RMR. But let's go to a top team here. So obviously the top teams before this event would have been Complexity, Liquid, and Furia, but in reality, I don't really think that they've proven themselves that all too much. And I know that some of them qualified to certain levels and stages, so this might look a little bit silly, but actually, you know what? I will pull it up, okay? I'll pull it up while I'm doing this, but either way, to see where they qualified, but I think the team that has looked the best overall is actually probably... It's a little bit weird, because in all honesty, they... Like, the 3-0 teams were Wildcard and MIBR, but I'm not really gonna... It's hard for me to necessarily say that they're going to do a lot of damage, because I think MIBR is improving constantly. And I think that's probably one of the best aspects of their team. But I'm just not really sure if I truly believe in MIBR today, but I do believe in the long-term project of MIBR. Let me just pick a team, okay? So anybody that could possibly make the major playoffs, I would say that of Liquid, Complexity, Furia, MIBR, and Wildcard, the only real team that I think has a true opportunity of doing that has to be... It depends. If Wildcard get to play from their rooms, there is a chance they do decently. I'm going to say this. I think Wildcard will qualify for the elimination stage. I actually think that they prove so much to me, and I just want to say, like, if they get to keep playing from their own hotel rooms, that's possible. But if they actually don't, I would probably just put them more down here, in a win or two in the opening stage. But they're kind of in between both of these, so I think they qualify for the elimination stage. And for people that, for just a reminder, the opening stage is what used to be called the challenger stage. The elimination stage is what was called the legend stage. And then the championship stage, which was the major playoffs, I'm just going to still call that the major playoffs, like the top 8. So I want to also talk about the fact that I think that if I really rated these teams, I think Complexity can still win in the elimination stage. They didn't do themselves any favors by losing early on. So at the Americas RMR, they started the event by, I think they beat Bestia, they beat Boss, they lost to MIBR, and then they beat M80. That's a pretty solid run for them overall. And I think that actually, of all the teams, I think Complexity kind of looks like a wild card right now. Just because wildcard, their run, it was 3-0, but it was against, okay, and it was actually very legit too. It was against Liquid, Pain, and 9Z. So you could have said that all 3 of those teams were probably teams you thought would make it to the major. So wildcard, you just have to give it some credit. Like Stanislaw is the best IGL at this entire event. Okay, he's just the best in-game leader. Like I don't care about what's happened over the last 12 months with some of these other in-game leaders. Like, he called some of the best CS and kept his team more focused than practically anybody I saw, with the exception, of course, of MIBR, who I think will win in the elimination stage. I think that Lukowski's getting better every single game that I watch him, and I feel like he and MIBR are totally solid enough to probably be like the top 12 teams in the world. And I think that the thing is, when I see Liquid, Furia, MIBR, and Complexity, all of those teams now, to me, 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 of those teams have proven enough to me lately that they could all vie for spots in the top 14 in the world. Top 15, maybe. But I think Furia was quite bad, actually. I think Furia was very, very, very shaky. For an America's RMR, where they usually dominate, they were 15-1 in RMR series leading into this America's RMR, and then they barely squeaked through with a 3-2 beating M80. I don't want to say that they won't win anything, because I think Fury do look better than they had in the past, but this is just based off of what I saw so far at the America's RMR. Beyond that, I'm going to say Liquid also get wins in the elimination stage. They went 3-1. So I'm going to put them there. And now kind of talking about some of these lower tier teams. Pain's obviously decent. We'll get to them. Kaze is also in the lowest tier for me. I think they got to change something up. I feel like there was not a lot to be excited about with that team. They kind of felt like cannon fodder for a lot of the other teams. They lost to Imperial, they lost to Furia, and they lost to Red Canids. And they did take a map off of Red Canids, but the margin of defeat was quite crazy against the actually good teams in Imperial and Fury. They both lost 13-5. And I can't really vouch for them in any capacity. Like, even the maps that they lost. So they beat the one map they won against Red Canids. They did beat them pretty handily, 13-4. But they lost Dust 2 and Vertigo 13-8, 13-6. So, yeah, they're pretty bad. I'd say just blow up these 3 rosters pretty much right now. I'd probably put Nouns at the top of it just because I thought they would do better. Whereas Kaze and Crew, I'd say before the event, I would have said Boss, Kaze, and Crew were the worst 3 teams. And now I'd have to say Nouns just because that was just really sad. Okay, M80. I'm going to give a hot take. I think they're the one seeding victim throughout this. I just feel like when I look at what Imperial did versus what M80 did, I don't really understand the seeding of this in general. For example here, through both of these teams went 3-2 technically, and Imperial beat Kaze, who is an 0-3 team. They beat Crew, which is a 1-3 team, and they beat Red Canids, which is a 2-3 team, to qualify. They lost to MIBR and they lost to Pain. On the other hand, and both of those teams, by the way, MIBR and Pain qualified. On the other hand, M80 lost to Boss, who went 1-3, and they lost to Complexity, who went 3-1. So it's kind of a weird, like, the quality of teams that Imperial lost to was higher, but the quality of teams they beat was lower, because M80 beat Red Canids, 2-3 team, Legacy, 1-3 team, Bestia, 2-3 team. They beat 2-3 teams and a 1-3 team, and I will just say, like, outright, Bestia, Red Canids, and Legacy are better than Kaze, Crew, and Red Canids. So really, I'm comparing Kaze and Crew with Legacy and Bestia. Legacy and Bestia are better than Kaze and Crew. So yeah, I think M80 were sort of unfortunately thrown into that 7th place decider with Furia, which they lost, and they lost pretty convincingly, to be fair. But yeah, I think they were seeding victims in a way, and I think if they had gotten, I think they could have beaten Boss, and they should have beaten Boss, and that would have put them on a much better route to make it to the major, where they would have then probably been battling with like MIBR, Complexity, and Wildcard, but instead they lost to Boss, and that really screwed them up. Now for 9Z, I think there's a lot to think about for this team because they've been on the downtrend for quite some time. Martinez is easily their best player, but he's not really an opera that can take over games as well. His aim is more about tracking and just being in the right place at the right time. And he's actually fairly cerebral within the 9Z system. I actually think he makes a lot of great rotations. Not really the flashy opera that I had expected him to be with what he showed at the beginning of his time with Movistar. But for the rest of the players on the roster, I mean, Buddha and Huaso Peak, I think, are really weak. Buddha technically played quite well at the Americas RMR, but Max and DGT aren't really a strong enough duo that you can afford to have support players that are not keeping it together most games. Like, at Elisa also, they did quite badly. So, Red Canids are also at the top of much to think about. And I will say, I think Red Canids are good, but the much to think about is really just, are we really keeping Nithon on this team? Because Nithon, unlike a Python, I mean, maybe like a Python, actually, he kind of had a chokehold on this team for how bad he was. And his calling isn't necessarily good. So a lot of the Red Canids performances were very individually driven. Like, you would just see Henny get a multi-frag. There, they went around. You would see Venom Zera get 2 kills for no reason on a bomb site hold by himself. There, they went around. Cold Zera making some good movements in the mid-round. There, they went around. Davideus, who played a little bit beneath his standards at this event. He did, in fact. Also very good aggressive rifler. But Nithon just seems to be the weak link. And I really dislike when the IGL is the weak link because it kind of just seems like an easy cope. But like, I just can't see a huge flaw in any of the 4 players. I really can't. I think all 4 of the other guys are playing well. And that's coming from a guy who, in 2022, I said when Cold Zero was playing on the team that qualified, I think it was 00 Nation for the IEM Rio Major, I felt like Cold Zero was actually dead weight on that team. He wasn't calling, he wasn't fragging, I didn't know what he was doing. But I think he's had a huge resurgence and a bit of a comeback as an individual player. So I would just probably have to remove Nithon if I'm them. Now, Legacy, I think we all know that Dumao and Lado are a great combo. I think Dumao had gotten weirdly overrated when he was coming up, but because he was very baity. But I actually see him playing much more impactful style now, and I actually rate him pretty highly myself now. But just because he goes into the fray way more and doesn't bait as viciously as he used to. And now, because he would always be last man alive. He would always be LMS, last man standing. And then I would just be like, of course he's going to get 1 kill and look good on the stat sheet. Like, and then people would just pull up the stat sheet and like, look, he has a 1.15 rating. It's like, yes, but he baited everybody. He never gave himself a chance to win the round. And now he's actually playing for round victories. He's actually playing to be a win condition as opposed to just kind of being a baiter. And I respect that. So beyond that, though, I just think they kind of fall off after Dumao and Lado. So a little bit top heavy. Now, 0-3 major picks. I am going to be picking Imperial there. By the way, I don't think it should come as a surprise. I'm not putting anyone in the major contender and major playoffs. I just put those here just so you guys would kind of see, like, none of these teams are really competing. But let me just get into Imperial being the 0-3 major pick. I think Vinny totally overperformed at the Americas RMR. Like, he went off with above a 1.1 rating as an individual, and he's not usually doing that. Like, that came out of nowhere. And I also feel like they were fortunate to not play the 7th place decider versus an M80 or a Furia, and I would have had both of those teams beating Imperial. Beyond that, Phelps played quite badly. Decenti was pretty bad in the Americas RMR in general, and he was usually their best player. And Try, he's been very good for them, but it seems like I don't know what it is. It's like the rest of the team got worse when Try joined, although Try has better stats than Henny. So it's kind of a weird situation where it's almost like they might have actually been better with Henny, even though statistically Try is better. So a curious case for Imperial. They're kind of almost in a weird much to think about category, but obviously, like, because they qualified, I have to put them a higher tier. And now Pain. I like Pain. I think that they have some good weapons on the roster. And because we don't even actually necessarily have to talk about just Big Uzera with this team anymore. Like, Snow has been not a revelation, but he's been a really solid piece. And I almost, at this point, position for position, I might rate Snow higher than Skulls, even though, you know, I guess they're not all playing one-to-one positions, but it's kind of like a support rifler in some ways. But I think Lux and Kawez, the real anchors of the team, were actually very good for Pain throughout this. And NQZ on top of that, like, what the hell possessed him? You know, NQZ, I think by the end of the Americas RMR, was the highest rated player for the team. I'm going to put them for qualifies for the elimination stage here. And I think that's going to be the tier list, guys. So, yeah, the highest ranked teams, for me, the way I'm perceiving these teams right now, MIBR and Liquid are getting wins in the elimination stage. I think MIBR is actually the most complete team, by the way. I think they're actually the most complete team. I think sure, they don't have a superstar opper, but they have 2 riflers now who are effing good. Insani, let's see, how many riflers here are better than Insani? Twist and Naf, Elige, Queserado, maybe? I don't even know Queserado's is good anymore. Like, Thomason was really good, but I don't know if I actually think he's better. Yeah. No, I think Insani is a top 6 player in the entire Americas RMR. They have Lukowski, who's just literally getting better. Every single tournament Lukowski plays, he is getting better for them. And for Liquid, yeah, they're quite good. And I just think that they will put some stuff together. I think they can get to the elimination stage. The next stage after the opening stage. And Complexity, Wildcard, Pain, and the qualifies for elimination stage. I think they've all were solid. This might be a little bit too hopeful, actually. Let's put Wildcard down one, okay? I think that's kind of more realistic. Pain, on the other hand, yeah, I think they were solid. I think they're solid. Furia are almost between 0-3 and a win or two in the opening stage. And Imperial 0-3 major picks, Seeding Victim M80, much to think about, 9Z Red Canids Legacy, Bestia Boss. Gotta change it up. Now it's Kaze and crew. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate SkinClub for sponsoring this video. And as always, being toxic is a choice.